Hey Tubies, it's Psychic Bob. Well, I'm sitting here this afternoon, I'm contemplating my moon pentacle. Isn't this cool? It's got the moon, and then around it are the phases of the moon from full moon to dark moon. And it's waxing on one side and waning on the other. Isn't that cool? Can you see the different phases going around? Anyways, I love this because, I've been thinking lately about time. The ancients used to mark time by the moon and the sun and the stars. And I think we've really lost touch with that these days. But the thing that's got me thinking about all this about time is that it seems to be that more and more people are encountering experiences of what I would call breaks or crosses of the space-time continuum. And I got a note here from Chris Damask, and he said, Psychic Bob, would you be able to do a talk on fourth dimensional alien beings for this UFO Friday? And I thought that was perfectly timed because I've been meditating on time and space. And when he brought up this idea of the fourth dimensional aliens, I thought this is something we need to talk about. So anyways, gather around. I have some ideas I want to share with you and some things I think you'll find interesting. Well, a lot of people, as I said today, are now starting to bring up this whole concept of space and time. But really, this is goes back much farther than we realize. And as I've talked about in the past, we've seen these trans-dimensional spacecraft, these UFOs that appear to blink in and out of our dimension. And it's very much believed by ufologists that these craft somehow are opening wormholes or dimensional portals or something where they're able to cross vast distances and bend time and space. Well, we always like to think of ourselves as such a modern group of people. But, this concept actually is older than the internet age. It really is. I love to read Fate magazine. Do you guys remember that magazine? Fate magazine is an old magazine. Here's a copy of one of them. And it covers metaphysical topics. You can still get Fate today. It's been around since the late 1940s. But I have some old vintage copies of Fate. And this one here, I don't know if you can see it. This is an original one that I bought. It's from August of 1954. Can you see that? It was 35 cents. August 1954. And they have an amazing story in here, which I won't read because it's really long, but I just want to touch in on it because it ties in with this concept of the fourth dimension. This article is called Visitor from 50,000 AD. Isn't that interesting? And what it's about is there was a scientist named Dr. X, and he investigates paranormal phenomena. And one night, Dr. X was in his bed, and he literally saw a glowing ball of light, like a spotlight on the wall. And it grew and grew, and it formed into a person who then appeared literally in his room in three-dimensional reality. And in fact, I'll just read a little segment of this article to you. I think you'll find it interesting. He says, I write of my incredible experience with an entity from the distant future. First, because it is true. Second, I write in the hope that others who have had similar experiences will be encouraged to come forward and admit that such things do happen. Hold on, so I'm just going to jump through because it's a long article. And it says here, first of all, he kept hearing a voice talking to him. And he's like, it was coming inside of his head. And he thought he was crazy. And he got up and turned on the lights. Nobody was in the room. And he laid back down in bed. So now he's just laid down in bed. He says, I lay back on my pillow and tried to relax. After a long moment, I began to doubt again. Maybe this was nothing but a dream, after all. Then my eyes were attracted to a spot of light on the wall near the foot of my bed. It was about 4 feet above the floor and over 2 feet wide. I watched the spot in fascination. It appeared to whirl and lengthen. Then it grew brighter, and the wall behind it became transparent. As I watched, the light stopped whirling and took human form. A white-robed woman stood there. I knew she was beautiful, though it was impossible to focus upon her face to confirm this. It was difficult to see details since the concentration upon any part of her body caused the spot to shift. However, the overall picture was very clear. The landscape beyond her was hazy, but a tall mountain with a snowy crest was visible in the distance. As I moved my head to take in all the details of the scene around the white-robed figure, my eyes again fell upon the clock. It was midnight. I was surprised at the passage of time. Finally, the lady spoke. She said, "I am she, the worker. I am here, there, and everywhere, and nowhere. I have been and I will be. I am Leisha, a worker for the one and only." She pronounced her name with pride. My wife tossed restlessly in her bed, but Leisha appeared not to notice. I wondered if my wife would be able to see and hear Leisha if she woke. Leisha appeared to read my thoughts, for she said, "Pay attention. Your wife will sleep. I have work for you to do." "What kind of work?" I whispered. "You will learn in due time," she said. "First, you will receive a letter from Mrs. L.O. of Red Bank, New Jersey." Leisha gave the street and number, and as she did, the full name and address of L.O. appeared on the wall beside her in bright letters. As I looked at the shimmering name and address, I knew I would always be able to remember it. And the lady goes on, she says, "L.O. will type you a letter," Leisha said. Then as an afterthought, she added, she has to type because she lost her fountain pen. Write her a card and let her know that the contact has been made. Karma must be served. The words sounded weary. A moment later, Leisha's form faded from view. The name and address remained on the wall for several minutes. Then they too disappeared. Anyways, this goes on, and he talks about the continuing connection with Leisha. And basically, she gave him a mission to contact this lady, that they would have a contact psychically. According to Leisha, what happens in this story, and I don't think it's a story, I think it's a true account, is that they're in the future, 12,000 years in the future, they're supposed to be born a certain child. But for whatever reason, things get off skew at some point in the future, and this child does not enter the world. And it creates a big karmic rift for a lot of people's lives, because this person's going to do a lot of good. So Leisha, from 50,000 years in the future, comes back to 1954 to help start a chain of events that will eventually make the path fix the way it's supposed to be. Anyway, it's very complex, but the fact is, this is a visitor from the fourth dimension. Now, later on, Leisha goes on to say that she is connected to Atlantis and Tibet. She doesn't actually say she's an alien, but you get the sense from the article that she's an alien, possibly a Pleiadian or a Martian or Venusian, and that she's working to guide certain civilizations on the Earth. Well, during their times of meetings, Leisha shows Dr. X the future of the world, what the world will be like. He's not given all the details because they don't want to, offset it again, but he's just given enough that he won't affect the future. So anyways, this is very interesting because in 1954, if this happened like I believe it did, then this means that at least since that time, we have a documented account of fourth dimensional visitors coming. Now you're going to say, what's fourth dimensional? Well, we have our earthly life, which is 3 dimensions. The fourth dimension is, some scientists and mystics believe that it is the dimension of time. And when I read this article, I feel that the fourth dimension is kind of the time element in the time-space continuum. So when you work in the fourth dimension, you can go forward and backward in time and experience any experience at any time in created history, really. So the visitor from the fourth dimension in this story helps to save the world from future sorrows and catastrophes. So, now what we're seeing, of course, with UFOs is there are a lot of people claiming to meet aliens who have also given them information about the future or information about the past. And it's always fascinating because when these aliens talk to the Earth people, it's as if they've been outside of time and they know what's happened or what's about to happen. And they don't speak from a theoretical place. They speak from an actual very factual place. So, the question is is the fourth dimension a real dimension? Is it accessible? And who is going there? This is an area that I've heard many people speculate that the American government is even exploring. It is believed that there are elements within the government who have tried to open the fourth dimensional portal. Some people are speculating that the CERN, the big hydro collider, it was in Switzerland or France, is a fourth dimensional experience basically about to happen. Very possibly. Because according to many scientists, time and space are actually fluid and they can be bent and shaped and molded and adjusted. And if that's true, then if we had an advanced race of beings who knew how that worked, how time and space are fluid and could manipulate them, then things such as time travel, interdimensional travel, all of this then really become a reality. And, I've always said the science fiction of today is simply the science of tomorrow. And I do believe there have already been experiences of time and space slipping. I had a client one time who came to me for a reading, and she said she literally one day walked down the road, and it was as if she was in the 1800s. It's like suddenly she said the houses were very different, and there were like wagons and horses. And she said then she turned a corner, and it was like the modern world came back. And when she went back to see, maybe it was a movie being filmed, everything was back to modern day. So I have directly encountered people who have had this kind of overlap of time and space. And I believe that if there are people such as advanced alien civilizations or even our own government working and experimenting with that, it could create, in a sense, tears in the space-time continuum that would allow other times to bleed into our time or our time to bleed into others. And on top of that, I do believe that besides just our current Earth and our current timelines, there are also other dimensions as well. So then we've got the issue of dimensional portals and then timelines within those. So this is very complex stuff. But this article in Fate magazine, I think, is very fascinating. And I would encourage you guys to, do some research on the fourth dimension. I've heard from many UFO people that the Arcturians are masters at time-space travel. I've heard the Palladians have touched in it, and also the Andromedans. So it is my belief that all of them do exist, and they do all have a connection in it. Now, somebody asked me recently, says, Psychic Bob, what has been your personal experience with the aliens? What do you think about them? Well, I can tell you, I've had four separate occasions where I had direct intervention or interaction with alien presences. And that would probably be a whole video, but I'll just give you real briefly some of my accounts. My first account was probably 15 years ago, I guess now. It's been a while. I literally was on a bus up at our local shopping center, and I was looking out the window, and I saw a spherical UFO floating way up in the sky. Now, if you brought it down to Earth, it would probably been the size of a car, but it was a perfectly round, shiny ball, and it was not moving. It was not a balloon. It was as high as the airplanes fly, but it was totally motionless in the sky. I later went on to find out that this is a whole class of UFOs called the silver sphere UFOs. You can look that up. Excuse me. Pardon me, my voice is going. Silver sphere UFO. Then I had another experience where I literally got up in the middle of the night to get some water. And I walked over to my dining room window, which is a big window just like this one next to me here. And when I opened the drapes, I don't know why I was opening the drapes, but I was literally up and I felt this compulsion to open the drapes. When I opened the drapes, I saw literally across from my building, floating in the air, a giant, and I kid you not, mothership UFO. It must have been like the size of a football stadium, honestly. And it was literally floating over the building. There are a bunch of high-rise condos down our street. It was floating over the building across from me. It was absolutely motionless. Now, what's really strange about this, as I was watching it, I felt like I was in a trance state. And what's very strange is instead of like grabbing my camera and photographing it, you know what I did? And this is what's really weird. You would think I, of all people, would be excited. I closed the blinds and I literally went back to bed. Now, I know this actually happened because I had a glass of water with me. And I left the glass of water on the counter right in the dining room. So I remember when I walked out, I put the glass of water on the counter and I opened the blinds. And the next morning when I got up, the glass of water was still there, half drank, on the counter where I placed it. Now, what's interesting about that is those type of ships, you know, I believe move interdimensionally. So when we talk about fourth dimensional aliens, how would you move a ship that large that quickly? There's definitely some interdimensional energy going on. Now, just to give you a quick note on that, I asked a friend of mine who's a psychologist, I said, why would I, of all people, see a ship like that and not film it, not wake people up to tell them? Why did I go back to bed? This doesn't make sense to me. And my friend said to me, he said, well, Bob, the human mind, he said that the fact that that happened to you is actually points to the reality of what you're saying. I said, why? He said, when the human mind is confronted with something that is so overwhelming, sometimes what it does is it just wants to compartmentalize the situation and just shuts it down. So he said, by you just closing the blinds casually and going back to bed, he said that was actually your brain taking over because what you saw was so overwhelming that you didn't know how to process it and your brain took control. Makes a lot of sense to me. Then I had a third experience where I did receive a transmitted message from the Pleiadians. Literally, it was telepathic. It came to me one night while I was out on a UFO watch. And they basically said, we are present, we are here, we will reveal ourselves very soon. Didn't get a lot of detail, just that, but it was clearly coming from outside of myself. And then the fourth experience I had was I was literally one day doing a reading and I believe it was an Andromedan, channeled directly through me. Now, what's interesting is I was not actually going to do a channeling. I was doing a conscious reading, but something came over me and put me in a trance, a mild trance, but I was still conscious. And a voice was coming out of me and having a conversation with my client, and they knew each other. I could hear it all and observe it all, but I had no control over my body. So that alien entity, she confirmed later that she had an alien, a Pleiadian, come and visit her as a child, and they used to have great conversations, and he would relay telepathic messages to her. Well, he literally, his whole physical energy and voice came through me. It was so shocking, I took the afternoon off and I didn't do any more readings. I'd never had an experience. It's only happened once. So I have had a number of encounters with the aliens, and I can vouch for what I believe is the truth of the interdimensional reality. So are there fourth dimensional beings? I have to personally say yes. And when I read this account in Fate by Dr. X, again, I have to say more evidence. So anyways, there are my 2 cents on interdimensional aliens. I do believe they're here. I do believe they understand the time-space continuum. I do believe on some degree, possibly our own government is already exploring and experimenting with that. I imagine much to the chagrin of the alien cultures. I think that we have to be very careful with that. And as this article in this magazine showed, things can go wrong in the time-space continuum. And in this book, Laisha said that she was traveling to many different times because it took many steps to set things back in motion. So see, even the littlest actions when you're dealing with time and space can have grave consequences. So anyways, let that be a lesson. If any of you decide to explore time and space travel, be very careful because there are consequences. But that being said, I feel, and I've said it, in the next 2 years, this has been my prediction, we're going to start to have revelation of all of this, of the aliens, and we're going to get a lot of knowledge. So be ready for that because it's going to be a time of growth, a time of fascinating discovery. Don't let it scare you. The fact is that the aliens wanted to take over. They could have by now. And so I believe that they're monitoring, they're studying, they're learning. I do believe they cross time, space, and dimensions, and they are working in the fourth dimension as well. Anyways, guys, well, listen, I'm going to keep it short today. Psychic Bob has a lot of readings. For those of you trying to reach me for readings, I am still getting through my lists. Don't worry, Psychic Bob didn't forget you, okay? I will get to you. Thank you for your patience. You guys are the best. I love you. By the way, if you want to get on my schedule for a private reading, send me an email at readings@robert-hickman.com. I'll put the link in the box below. Don't call my office number right now. There are problems with that phone system, so send me an email. It'll get to me quicker, okay? In your email, include your phone number, please, and that will help me get back to you quicker. Also, if you just want to learn more about me and read my website, that is over at www.robert-hickman.com. Anyways, I'd love to hear from you and hopefully get you on my schedule. But in the meantime, tell me in the info box below, or in the comments section below, tell me, have you ever experienced a time slip, a mixing of dimensions, or felt like you crossed between times? I'd love to hear about that. Or maybe you've met a fourth dimensional being as well. I'd love to hear from that as well, about that as well. You guys are best. I love you. Happy Friday. Keep it here. We got more coming tomorrow. Tomorrow's Saturday. And that means it'll be our Saturday night seance. And we might do a Ouija seance tomorrow. Will you guys want a Ouija seance? Tell me in the box below. Ouija seance, yes, tomorrow, or channeling? What do you want, channeling or Ouija? Let me know. All right, I love you guys. We'll see you back here then. But until then, may you always blessed be.